Hi everyone, and welcome to this section on aligned relating. And specifically in this session, we're with Booster Radvik and Rachel Rickards. If you don't know them, I've known them for a couple of years now. They've been popular on my Raw Attraction podcast, and I've done a workshop with them in Berlin. And I think they're two of the best teachers in the world at the moment who are going around teaching about their embodied intimacy workshops, and they're very, very profound, and I highly recommend checking them out if you haven't had a chance to do so. They're mostly in Europe, but you're expanding. You have been in America, haven't you, as well?
America and Southeast Asia.
So yeah, they're doing stuff all over the place. So today, though, we're going to be talking about sex, and it's something that Booster and Rachel don't talk too much about on their online platforms, which have a fairly big following now. And so we're going to dive quite deep into their sex life over the next few videos, and so I hope you get some good insights and that you can take to use in your own life. So welcome to you both.
I'm honored to be here.
So we're going to talk about sex. So we're going to start. You mentioned before about threesomes being something you've consciously chosen to bring into your partnership on occasion when it feels right. So maybe, Booster, you want to give an indication of how do you choose partners to come in, and what is it? How does that all work? Because it seems like probably quite complicated for people listening. How you manage to arrange it all for starters.
Yeah, I think even start where do we meet people who would be a potential fit to actually make love to both of us. And usually that happens in environments such as a larger workshop that is looking consciously at sexuality and relating that we are participating in, or in environments where we meet other teachers who have done their work to be able to meet us where we would like to be met. And sometimes we travel and teach and vacation in those communities abroad. There's also people. So where is a big indicator, because it requires people to kind of embody a certain kind of culture that is not set in stone in this traditional conservative culture of where an intimate and a sexual contact can be experienced with outside of a marriage, basically. And so how, or it would be either Rachel or me beginning to like somebody, and they would approach us, or we would approach them, and we would befriend them, and then that flirt would go into something more, and so forth, and just starting that regular cycle of there's interest here, and then involving Rachel, or she involves me, and we meet the three of us, and usually then we set a time and a place, and we do this little game of talking into what are the desires, what are the fears, what are the boundaries. And we go around, the three of us, and we find kind of the lowest common denominator. And we breathe a lot, and we cuddle a lot, and we create a lot of kind of connection and safety, and really making sure that this energy that is here because of this attraction, this fascination, is cycled through all three of us. So it doesn't become me and a woman, or Rachel and a woman, it becomes Rachel and a woman and me. So there's this continual circling of energy, so we're all fed by it. And also it lacks any goal orientation. Nothing needs to be put into anything, or anything needs to be done, or anything needs to be achieved. It's really about the connection and the playfulness and what kind of wants to happen. And sometimes that's just a good cry. Sometimes that's just some really fun, playful, kinky sex. Sometimes it's just a deepening conversation. And sometimes one of us gets triggered because we feel ourselves outside, or we're touched by something, and then that becomes the center of attention. So Yeah, and I think it also requires a being who is grounded enough to realize that they cannot become the center of attention. It's almost like they are peeking into our love life, and they will most likely be left along the road. We will connect with them over Messenger, or if we come back to that place again, or but because we travel so much. It is somebody who's very, very resourced and self-responsible, and maybe also linked to a network of their own lover or lovers, whom of course they would be transparent with that they've had an encounter with us, and vice versa. So an open system. So those are some pieces around threesomes that make them quite easy, delightful, and repeatable.
Yeah, before I ask Rachel a similar question of how she likes to create threesomes and what makes them good, just listening to Booster speak, you may be thinking like, where have I learned about threesomes or foursomes before? Probably nowhere, or probably from porn. And in porn, it's, just crazy animalistic kind of stuff happens, and you don't really learn anything. Just listening to Boosters speaking there, it really kind of helped me develop a new way of thinking about having group sex or just group intimacy. Is really important. So yeah, Rachel, what makes these group experiences so appealing to you when they arise, and what makes a good one for you when they happen?
Yeah, what's appealing to me, I mean, there's a couple different contexts. One is like with Booster and I, and then one is, me separately as an individual. And with Booster and I, what makes it appealing is that we have this kind of love field that exists between the two of us. And so when we open up to invite people into our sex life, we're like expanding our love field to include them. So it's like they're bringing their energy in, and they're also kind of resting on the foundation of what we've already created. So it feels very expansive and very beautiful, and it's fun. It's like also Booster and I have been together now for some years, and we have our own kind of sexual routines, and you get your comfort places, and this is like a kind of energy shot that our relationship gets, and that so it's like it's a mutually beneficial, like we give them the energy of this solid foundational relationship that has so much love to play with, and they give us a shot of kind of energy and passion and excitement, and together those two kind of really fuel one another into this really ecstatic experience, or a really sweet experience too. I mean, the thing about our connections and threesomes is that they don't have the goal of sexual intercourse. We've had many things that I would still consider threesomes where there was no intercourse between any of us, but there was a lot of sexual energy flowing, and it's really fun to just play with that energy between three bodies. And I think that that's a really great way to start, because we're so we're so used to having sex one-on-one. So even when we're in three-way dynamics, it can get really comfortable, and there's patterns that come up around two people. And so if we have the ability to slow down and is like allow the energy to run through three vessels, three bodies, is quite a skill and quite an art to slow down enough so that, and we had this beautiful threesome with a girl one time, and she was touching me as something was happening between Booster and I, and she was like, I can feel the energy of your connection in my body. And it was like, yes, you get it. There's a third thing that can happen in these experiences when we're all connected.
Beautiful. No, I'm lost for words.
Mind is blown. Perfect.
Yeah.
What have you said, Rachel? Great.
So yeah, my next question would be perhaps for a heterosexual guy who's someone who relates as that. Would you think it's more? What are your recommendations around bringing another man in when that wants to arise, but you're very new to it and you don't know how to kind of interact with another guy sexually in the same scene. Like how do you navigate that?
Yeah, so you see, we are all like hooked on connection. So I would never be in a scene or a scenario or a situation where I was with Rachel and then somebody else was there, but he wasn't with me too. So I would want to be very careful about what is my connection with my brother here, who wants to make love to Rachel as well as I want to make love to Rachel and make love to him too in some energetic or physical sense. So how does he feel about that? How do I feel about that? What's the intimacy? And I find often like male bonding very special when we step into this homophobia. We're like, does it mean that I'm gay? Do I get to be turned on? Can I make out with you as well as with Rachel? So there's a tenderness of vulnerability and a beauty that can open up because we are not used to having pleasure with other men unless we are gay and we're fucking other men. But these threesomes that I have with other men, they're obviously heterosexual with a curiosity towards the bisexuality. But more as a connection, more than I'm turned on by you and I want to put it inside of you. It's more like I feel drawn to you. I feel I want to trust you. I want to share this experience with you. I want to, get closer to you and to Rachel. And I'm a little scared. I don't know if I can get it up. So it becomes a very human interaction. That once we allow space for those fears and maybe for the boundaries. Like I'm okay with everything, but I just don't want you to suck me. For example. Okay, I won't put my mouth on you. Okay, great. That's a great boundary. Then something can relax because then we're on the same page. And within that connection, then we can allow whatever wants to happen to arise within this triad. And with lots of breaths, a lot of laughter and giggle and sweetness and passion sometimes too. And so I think forget about the goal, forget about getting it on, having it hard, or forget about like how it's supposed to look. And porn, sex and threesomes, great if you have it, but that's not really a good guide because that's not based upon brotherhood. So for me, it's a deep bonding with another brother to share love and pleasure, and it's healing in that way,
So a lot of it is knowing where your boundaries are, perhaps before you go into a scene with something unknown. You want to know where your physical boundaries are, and then to communicate them vulnerably and then just be present with what happens. Because I would imagine that not many guys watching are as comfortable as perhaps you are with your homosexuality and your sexuality. You're very confident being. So advice for people is mainly around boundaries, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing, to have an idea of what you would be comfortable
boundaries
with.
And desires.
And yet when we sit down here and we take some breaths and we connect and cuddle and like say, hey, we want to have an experience with you. In that moment, before we do anything, like, where do you see your curiosity going? And where is the no? Where is the maybe? So we make an agreement, because I think we can have ideas about something happening in the future, but I think I really want to rely upon what the body is saying when we are here now in this given time frame. Like, what wants to happen? Because we are here now as we are right now versus a set, fixed idea, if that makes sense. But then to stick into that, as we have the experience, to not go over that, is very, very important that we really honor those agreements and we don't push because we are horny or we are, if it was to happen, we can just name it and say maybe next time, but let's stick within the agreements. So we don't regret that afterwards, because we were just
Mm.
horny and high and cuddled up on oxytocin, and we can be on conscious awareness of who we are right now, because we're so connected, right?
Mm.
It's literally a drug when you go into it, you know?
Mm.
I mean, all these biochemicals is super healthy for us to have that kind of connection and that kind of sex.
Mm.
Like medicine.
Yeah, those yes nos are very important before you're horny, because otherwise people take advantage of situations. So you really need to make that clear before you start anything, and start slow. If you're new to this and you've never had a group experience before, you want to start slowly, like Rachel we're mentioning here, that it just can be, you don't even have to take your clothes off for the first time. There's plenty you can do with your clothes on. So any final points you want to add on group experiences and group sharing?
Yeah, I think that there's a really important awareness to bring in, which is like who's the shortest legs or the weakest link. So in some situations with Booster and I, for example, if there's a woman who he and her have a lot of energy and I'm not as connected, then I'm usually the weakest link, and they're like really tending to me in that situation. Or if Booster and I invite, or there's a woman who doesn't really have any experience and she's kind of nervous and new, then really she's the weakest link and we're holding a lot more space for her. So it's like really bringing that into the awareness and allowing that person's pace to kind of guide the experience, instead of the people who have the most experience and energy like dominating. I think that that's a really important awareness.
Yeah.
Another big boundary I have that think that's really important is in these situations is if someone leaves the room, that everything stops. Because I think sometimes it's like someone can leave and the play can start, and then that person leaves and they try to come back and like, where do I belong? And it's really hard to insert yourself into a situation. And so that's like taking just little bites of that at a time can really help to build comfort and awareness around that. It's an interesting dynamic to try to fit into a sexual dynamic that's already playing out before you.
Yeah. And on that note, I think usually a sexual experience has a beginning and an end. And this couple is just moving towards some kind of orgasm, right? So what we do, we take a lot of pauses. I think you talked about the sacred pause, meaning we let go of the agenda. We come back and come out of the sexual trance. We let the cocks get soft and the pussies to dry out. Maybe that's too much to say, but you like the point is like, are you here with me? Am I here with you? So in those moments, when, for example, Rachel and another woman would get it on, so to speak, and I feel like, okay, I'm just like the third leg, or the shortest leg, whatever. Usually my response to that, I don't want to be a party pooper. I don't want to stop something that's so fun. But at the same time, I'm just like triggered and I'm not part of it. So that's usually, if I'm frozen, like they need to be aware that if I'm triggered, I might look kind of, no, it's good, it's fine. Like I'm not quite here, right? So that's that, like, how do we notice one another in that experience when we've kind of lost it, when we lost touch? Because in that place, I am in defensive strategy saying, no, fine, go on. But really, I'm not breathing, I'm not really here. I just kind of feel kind of embarrassed that I'm vulnerable and I'm going to ruin the party, you know? And those things, when they come into the center of attention again, they can be super healing, because I judge myself in that moment to have ruined your experience and I'm not a man enough or whatever it's like, but to actually be welcome back, and that then becomes the object of lovemaking is very, very important, and integrating, healing, and gives more room for next time somebody else has that same response of, well, now it's my turn to feel really insecure about I'm not getting it up, you know, and I feel like a loser, and I want to hide that, and you know, so that's how sex and relating and intimacy becomes really healing for all of us, because we all been there, we will all be there to create more permission. This is how we do it.
Yeah, I can imagine that these situations in groups, I mean, it happens when we're alone especially, but they bring up new things. They, as Rachel said in the previous videos we did with just Rachel, that pushing the edge of these boundaries that you were talking about in the Venn diagram type thing, is they're going to bring up things, and that's okay. And then as long as you've chosen a good partner to bring in, then you can talk about with it afterwards or the next day or whenever. So that's very important. Maybe we want to finish off by perhaps giving some people some ideas of things they can do in 3 or 4s.
Well, I think what we're really about is not trying to attain some kind of fantasy or idea, but really being in what is. So for example, Booster mentioned this game, and we pretty much play this almost all the time, especially at the beginning of threesomes, which is each person takes 2 minutes to share what their desire is to experience. Each person takes 2 minutes to share what their fears are about having this experience. And each person takes 2 minutes to share any boundaries that they have around having an experience. And when you're with 3 or more people and you get all of that information, there's a kind of container that self-appears. It's like, okay, now we know where all the boundaries and limits are. And now we know where all the desires are. And now we have something we can play inside of. We have a field of co-creation, of possibility that's actually authentic and true, that's meeting everyone's desire and staying within everyone's boundary. And for me, that's the interesting sweet spot to play in. Not the like, oh, well, if we did this, it would be so amazing. It's more like, this is where my desire is, and this is where my boundary is. And then in that, we can play. And I think, like Booster said as well, having a beginning, middle, and end. Making sure that we say, okay, we're going to take 1 hour for this. Instead of just this, we're going to start playing and see, you know, and then it's hours later and someone's gone way beyond what's comfortable for them. It's really important that at the beginning we have container, that there's a beginning, middle, and end, and we know what the maximum and the minimum kind of container setting space is for this exploration.
Beautifully put.
And also included in that is also a safe sex talk. Then we would talk about when we were last tested, what we were tested for, what were the results, what other relationships are we in, who else do we have unprotected sex with, and we could even go into what do we like, what are some physical things we don't like, you know, like kind of that hygiene, so we know like who are we inviting. That would even be before we jump into the desires, fears, and boundaries. And I think the last thing that I want to say is the importance of breathing and sounding. Because we usually take a lot of breaths, like deep in the belly, up into the heart, open the mouth and make a sound. And I think this sound, you can see like an orchestra of having different instruments. So you were piano, guitar, and violin. And for us to actually play harmoniously, we need to tune to the piano, right? And the guitar, like, you know, so just taking these breaths, like, I mean, literally, that listening, just the listening and the sounding itself, that begins to create, we are together. We are here as mammals that come together and we have one another's backs. So when we stop breathing, we know something is not right. Like Steve is not breathing for like the last 2 minutes, and I sensed that. Like, what? No sound come from you. You tense and guarded and kind of, you know, like. So you're in a strategy, in a defense of sorts, right? And you're not really here with me, right? So if we can create a baseline of safety and connection through breathing and sounding and listening, attuning, linking separate individuals into one happening, then we know when we are off the path and we know how to come back to the path. So that's like, then you can, of course, you can gaze, you can cuddle, you can do all of this, but gazing without breathing and sounding, cuddling without breathing and sounding, you can be checking out. You know, that's why we take all these breaths to come back, because whoa, the mind want to wander.
And that's coming back to that thing I mentioned before, is into me I see, getting embodied and being able to express what's happening for you, so that there's actually someone there who's doing the relating, and not a mind that's checking out and drifting off into tomorrow or yesterday or the past or the, you know, is being here. Who am I actually relating with? Who am I sharing intimacy with? Is someone home?
Yeah.
Do you
Are
have?
you home?
I'm wondering if you have an online application system for threesomes with you two.
Nah.
No, that'll be full.
Yeah. We have a scheduling software. You can schedule threesome with Rachel and Booster.com.
Location, time slot,
Yeah.
test results. That would be interesting.
If that ever happens, we'll link it below. But if you have comments or questions that we'll be happy to answer, just leave them below.